The Indian Revolt of 1857 was absolutely massive. It was an uprising that really shook the British Empire right to its core. But the big question is, how was it actually suppressed? Today, we're going to break down the systematic counterattack the British East India Company used to crush this monumental revolt. Let's get right into it.
So this is the central question we're tackling today. And look, if you're preparing for exams like the UPSC, this goes way beyond just memorizing dates. You really need to understand the British strategy, how they isolated the rebel centers, how they used their superior tech and command, and how they took out the leadership. Understanding that is key to analyzing everything that came next, especially that huge shift to direct crown rule over India.
Here's our game plan. We'll start with Delhi, the symbolic heart of the whole rebellion, and see the pretty dramatic end of the Mughal dynasty. Then we'll jump over to the fierce battles that took place in Kanpur and Lucknow. After that, we're going to follow the legendary story of the last stand in Jhansi and central India. And finally, we'll look at how those last embers of the revolt were stamped out for good.
You know, at first, the British were caught completely off guard. The revolt spread like wildfire, and they were scrambling. But by the middle of 1857, reinforcements started arriving, and they were finally ready to launch a full-scale, coordinated counterattack. Their strategy was methodical. Reclaim every single inch of territory, starting with the most important symbolic places. This is where the tide really begins to turn. Their first and most critical target was Delhi. Now, why Delhi? Because it wasn't just another city. It was the historical capital, home to the Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, who the rebels had chosen as their leader. This gave the whole revolt a powerful sense of legitimacy. So for the British, retaking Delhi was absolutely non-negotiable. It was the key to breaking the rebellion's morale and its symbolic spine.
And the battle for Delhi, well, it really boiled down to a showdown between these two figures. On one side, you have this aggressive British commander, John Nicholson, leading the charge with absolute brutal efficiency. And on the other, you have the elderly emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar, more of a poet than a warrior, who became the reluctant face of the entire rebellion.
The British assault, led by John Nicholson, was just swift and ruthless. By September 1857, they had the city, and the aftermath was decisive. The emperor's sons were killed, basically to make sure there were no future claims to leadership. And Bahadur Shah Zafar himself, he was captured and exiled all the way to Rangoon, where he died 5 years later.
So this is the big takeaway here. The fall of Delhi wasn't just a military defeat. This was the final, definitive end of the Mughal Empire, an institution that had shaped India for more than 3 centuries. With its leader gone and its heirs gone, the empire was, for all intents and purposes, officially over. Okay, with Delhi secured, the British turned their full attention to the Gangetic Plains. Places like Kanpur and Lucknow had become massive hubs for the rebellion. The man they sent to handle this was the new commander-in-chief, Sir Colin Campbell. His job was simple and clear: pacify the entire region, one city at a time.
Now, what's really interesting here is how neatly this slide shows the pattern of the campaign. In Kanpur, you have Nana Sahib leading the fight, but he couldn't hold out against Campbell's forces and eventually had to flee to Nepal. And then you look at Lucknow. It's a remarkably similar story. Begum Hazrat Mahal put up a really fierce resistance, but again, Campbell's army was too strong and she also had to escape to Nepal. Same British commander, same outcome for the Indian leaders.
All right, now our story shifts to central India and to one of the most iconic figures of the entire revolt. Here, the resistance had a face, the formidable Queen of Jhansi, Rani Lakshmi Bai. Her fight against the British would become the stuff of legend, a story of incredible courage against absolutely overwhelming odds.
So, the key matchup in this region was General Sir Hugh Rose versus Rani Lakshmi Bai. Rose's mission was to clear central India of all rebel forces, and Lakshmi Bai was pretty much the biggest obstacle standing in his way. This whole thing became a personal and, frankly, a relentless pursuit.
Sir Hugh Rose did eventually capture the fortress of Jhansi after a pretty brutal siege. But Rani Lakshmi Bai? No way was she going to surrender. She escaped, she continued the fight, and ultimately died in battle near Gwalior in June 1858. And in death, she became maybe the most powerful symbol of the entire revolt, a true legend of Indian resistance. And what about Tatya Tope, Nana Sahib's brilliant general? This just shows his incredible persistence. After Kanpur fell, he went to help Rani Lakshmi Bai. After Jhansi fell, he escaped into the jungles of central India and waged this brilliant guerrilla war for months that just drove the British crazy.
His campaign finally came to an end when he was betrayed by a friend, captured, and then executed in April 1859.
So, by early 1859, the major leaders had been defeated and the main cities were back in British hands. The back of the revolt had been broken. But the fight wasn't completely over yet. What was left was this long, difficult mopping-up operation for the British, hunting down scattered rebel groups and putting out the final, defiant pockets of resistance.
And this is a quick snapshot of how those final embers were put out. Across the country, key regional leaders who had fought so hard, like the elderly but incredibly tough Kunwar Singh in Bihar, Malvi Amatullah of Faizabad, and Khan Bahadur Khan of Bareilly, were systematically hunted down and eliminated. With their deaths, organized resistance pretty much came to a halt.
By the end of 1859, it was all over. 2 years of absolutely brutal fighting had finally come to an end. British authority was once again firmly and completely established across the entire subcontinent. The Great Revolt had been suppressed.
So we've seen how the revolt was crushed. But the story doesn't just end there, does it? The real question to think about is this. How did the memory of this brutal suppression, the end of the Mughal Empire, and the fall of these incredible heroes, how did all of that shape the character of India's long struggle for freedom over the next 90 years? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for watching.